Good morning, everyone. Rabbi, if you would open us with prayer, please.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitotav v'tivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Bless our you, source of the universe, who has provided us sacred texts of meaning with which to deepen our understanding of you and the world around us. Amen.
Thank you. Last week, it's been very difficult because we've had so many interruptions here and there. What I hope to do is finish next Sunday with all of Exodus. Last couple of weeks, we talked about the Ten Commandments, and then follows a bunch of what is sometimes called the Covenant Code, or lots of laws. We are not going to spend a lot of time on that, because there follows chapter after chapter on here's how you should decorate the temple and the Ark of the Covenant, and how long the curtain should be and the color, and so on and so forth. It is highly, highly detailed. But I do want to touch on the handout, which you have. Just gives a taste of some of these covenant laws. You might think of the next 3 chapters, the Covenant Code, as here are ethical, legal questions that have come up that we've had to address as a community. It's like a developing common law system, and here are precedents, and here's what you should do. Surely all this didn't happen at one point. Whoever strikes a person mortally shall be put to death. So if you kill somebody, murder them, you are put to death. If it was not premeditated, you can be exiled. Whoever kidnaps another person, whether that person has been sold or still in possession, shall be put to death. Probably the priest, Moses, the other, weren't sitting around thinking, let's think of every possible situation, but it happened, and then what is the appropriate punishment or response to that? That's chapter 21. Chapter 22, here's just a few, and see if they're in order in the scripture, if this fits with your American mindset. You shall not permit a female sorcerer to live. Whoever lies with an animal, has sex with an animal, shall be put to death. Probably not keen on killing sorcerers, but bestiality is still weird. Whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord alone shall be devoted to destruction. So you don't kill them, but they're sowing their own seeds. Like they made their bed, they got to sleep in it. You shall not wrong or oppress a resident alien, for you are aliens in the land of Egypt. You shall not abuse any widow or orphan. Yeah, we like that one a lot. You shall not spread a false report. Don't join hands with the wicked to act as a malicious witness. Don't follow the majority in wrongdoing. When you hear a witness in a lawsuit, you shall not side with the majority so as to pervert justice, nor shall you be partial to the poor in a lawsuit. This one I kind of like. When you come upon your enemy's ox or donkey going astray, you shall bring it back. Not even just your friend or neighbor, but even your enemy's donkey, you got to take it back. You can't steal it. So surely that came up in discussion. Well, it's the enemy's donkey. Can't I take it? No, that still doesn't belong to you. That would be stealing. What's the word to your mother or father? Do you recall that one, Aaron?
I'm not sure. What do you mean?
Of all these, not permitting a female sorcerer to live. If you do what to your parents?
Well, that's verse 21:17. Whoever curses mother or father shall be put to death. So slipped inside this long list of...
How did that get in there with bestiality and sorcerers? And what happens to every teenager? You ever curse? What about side eye? What does that get you? What about, oh my God, my mother annoys me? That's got to be something. Never hear anyone in this room, but just in case, So there are these very practical, as in the family thing, and then larger theological ones, and it all gets put in this massive code. At the end of all this, the Israelites say, oh, this is so wise and good, we agree to everything. If you think about it too, it's giving all these other laws gain credibility by their connection to what? That just Moses comes down and gives them the 10 Commandments, and here are ways that you live that out. Here are specifics for what that looks like. Is that fair?
Yes. And if I could just say, we should appreciate that we bring our 20th, 21st century modern American understandings of jurisprudence, where even if we're not trained in the law, we have an understanding that there are some things that are misdemeanors and there are some things that are felonies, and there are some things that, a parking violation or a speeding violation is different than, taking a gun onto an airplane or something, right? There are different categories. We've organized them that way, or there are violations of the tax code, which is different than violations of the criminal code. But it wasn't until the 11th, 12th century with Thomas Aquinas and with Maimonides in the Jewish world where they began to go through these compendia of laws, which in some ways are just sort of all thrown into a big box. These are the laws. You should not dishonor your parents, and you shouldn't be a sorcerer, or you should not pray for false gods, and you shouldn't sleep with animals, and this long list. And what Aquinas does, and what Maimonides do, is they sort of comb through all these laws and begin to organize them in the ways we think of them. If you do this, then this is the punishment that follows. Or we could look up all the laws that carry this punishment and find out those laws with that degree of gravity. So we're bringing a 20th century mindset to why these laws show up as they do and what the organizing principle is. There doesn't seem to be very much of an organizing principle other than sort of providing all these statutes, essentially. Some are maxims that essentially says, whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord alone shall be devoted to destruction. That doesn't provide a punishment for doing it. It sort of says, as Jonathon was indicating, that you're on your own. If you're worshiping the wrong gods, then bad things may befall you, and that's on you. But it doesn't describe a punishment, whereas whoever kidnaps a person shall be put to death. Whoever curses father or mother shall be put to death. So we have this, in Hebrew we would call it a kolbo, means sort of a catch-all for all of these laws. Maybe there's some a meaning to be discerned from why they follow in the order they do, or why we could draw some conclusions or make a sermon about why the law about honoring your parents is sort of wedged between these other capital offenses. Was that for rhetorical purposes, or was that in fact an infraction that was as egregious as were the others? But it's not until 1,000 years later, more, that in the 11th, 12th century, that we have a means of sort of organizing our legal statutes. So that's sort of just an insight. We've only had that for about 1,000 years, that understanding. Okay.
Well, let me add one of my favorites. If an ox gores a man or a woman and kills him or her, it's no harm, no foul, or it's not the owner's fault. It's an act of God, is how they would describe it. But if the ox gores and kills a second person, then it's the owner's fault. So they have a sense of developing justice there. It's like, that kind of makes sense. I mean, it's a wild animal, domesticated, but those things happen. But if you let it happen again, that's definitely your fault. So there's some sense to it, and then some just a very different mindset. That's 21, 22, 23. In chapter 24, Moses came down the mountain, told all the people these ordinances. They all agree. Moses was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. And 40 days, 40 years means what in Judaism or Israelite thought?
A long time.
A long time. Chapter 25 through 31, as I mentioned, are very clear descriptions, and I mean to the foot, of offerings of the tabernacle, how the Ark of the Covenant should look, the vestments for the priesthood, how you make the altar of incense, the Sabbath law, who the artisans are. When God finished speaking with Moses on Mount Sinai, God gave him the 2 tablets of the covenant, tablets of stone, written with the finger of God. So if you want to give the most authority to a document or to a law, this was written by the finger of God. So this is the official seal of the most important thing. This is the law. And the people, as I say, all accept that. And then, where I want to spend most of our time, we get to one of the most fascinating stories in, to me, all of the Bible. So, they're delivered, recap. There are a whole bunch of disparate people, tribes that are all slaves in Egypt, and Moses and Aaron rise up, and God delivers them after these different plagues or tests or shows of power. Blood, the water turned to blood, and boils and frogs, and then eventually the killing of the firstborn. And the Israelites escaped through the desert, crossed the Red Sea. The Egyptian armies defeated. Yea, Yahweh our God is the best one, and we are delivered. We move from slavery to freedom. And so the next whole rest of Exodus is trying to figure out what it means to live freely, and to be in a relationship with God. And it turns out it's really hard. When you're a slave, there's no freedom, but they tell you what to do, and there's one thing. But to live as free people means to be in covenant, in relationship with God, and here's how we stay faithful, to follow these commandments. And it turns out the people are terrible at following the commandments. And Moses, so chapter 32, after all those descriptions, we get to this story about, now it wasn't that long ago that they were freed from Egypt as slaves, and Moses is up on the mountain. And the people start to complain. This is they complain a lot. Often, pretty much all the time.
Right.
Okay. When the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people gathered around Aaron. Mom is away, so they go complain to Dad. It just strikes me as that way. They gather around Aaron and said to him, "Come, make gods for us. Who shall go before us?" What? As for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what's become of him. How did you forget? He told you where he was going. He went up there before. You just had Yahweh, God, and now we need new gods because Moses has abandoned us. So there probably is a direct connection to, well, if Moses is not here, who else must not be here either? God. So we need some new ones. Now, if you, it is reasonable if you think about it, what are the types of gods that are prevalent in this area at the time? Rabbi?
Idols.
Like what? Sun god. So there's a whole Egyptian pantheon. Lots of fertility gods. If you live on, so the two general things, if you have hunter-gatherer or like shepherd world, or you have farming, agricultural world, those can be related, but they're not necessarily the same. So if you're born in agriculture, you tend to have more fertility gods. A lot of the people around them had these fertility gods. Cows and various other animals are very important in that. And one of the main fertility animals, the food, wealth, is this calf or cow. And so, for some reason, they decide they need a new deity after they just were delivered. And it's like, forget the Egyptian gods, forget Yahweh, let's just get a new one where we are.
If I could, I'm going to get Charles. I'm saying, in some ways, it's not let's get a new God. In some ways, it's let's bring back the old God.
Oh, yeah, that's better.
Right? Let's revert back to the gods that were operative in Egypt when we knew who the leader was, or at least we knew where the slave master was, or we knew that we'd get food provisions, meager though they may have been, when they would show up. Yes? So in the absence of Moses and the fear that this God that Moses has called upon that's led them out of Egypt seemingly has gone AWOL, right? We know he's only going to be gone for 40 days, 40 nights, whatever length of time that means. The people get restless, they get nervous, they get frightened, and they prevail on Aaron to bring about, if you will, the old God, right? They're reverting back, and which gives rise to the cute little aphorism that as difficult as it was to take the Israelites out of Egypt, harder still was to take Egypt out of the Israelites, right? It's hard to change our thinking, right? It's hard to reorganize our thoughts, even though we may very well be in physically a different place. It's easy to revert back. Charles?
I must have missed the 40 days and 40 nights, but what is the period of time? It's obviously long enough to gather up all the gold and melt it down and make a calf and all that sort of
So
Right.
how long was Moses gone? The term in there, 40 days, 40 nights, as Aaron said, it rained 40 days and 40 nights in the flood. It means a while. It's not a specific time. So how long is 40 years wandering in the desert?
A long time. Wasn't Jesus in the desert also for 40 days, 40
Yeah.
nights? I mean, this number shows up. It's longer than a month, an entire moon cycle, many moons. It's not clear, but it's to suggest that it wasn't an overnight.
It's a while. Long enough to remember the old days when everything was great when we were slaves in Egypt. Or at least it was familiar to us. Let me throw in a thing that struck me. It's how long ago since the pandemic started? Anybody remember? 6 years. Feels like forever. It was okay for a few months, and then the world seemed to fall apart. And remember there was so much uncertainty. Do we have a vaccine, or when will we get a vaccine, and is it efficacious, and how do we get it? And then you have to wear masks, and no, don't wear masks, and yes, wear masks, and here's what they should be. And I remember watching videos of doctors online using disinfectant to clean groceries that were delivered to you, and all these things how to make hand sanitizer, and that we couldn't get toilet paper. The massive uncertainty that was there causes people to want safety and security and to something that is known. And a lot of people had issues and a whole bunch of reasons. And imagine that the whole world is one way, and now you're out there in the wilderness. The desert mean the same thing in the scripture. You're away from civilization, and there's no comfort. You're just traveling. What are we going to eat for food? Oh, bread rains from the skies. Well, I'm sick of bread. There's no meat. Quails are given to them. I'm sick of quail. I'm sick of T-bones and lobster. I get it every day. It's like, oh my God, you have bread and meat and water wherever they go, and they want to complain, and everything is uncertain. And so they're grasping at straws for something to make sense. And these old gods are in effect a way of, it's comfort food is another way to think about it. This is what we know. Aaron said to them, the provisional leader, "Take off the gold rings that are on the ears of your wives, your sons, your daughters, and bring them to me." Do you remember where these people were slaves? Where in the world did they get gold from? Oh, the Egyptians, get out of here. We're so sick of you because all these bad things happen when you're around. Take our gold, take our silver, take our clothes. So this is Egyptian gold. It's not blood money, but it's dirty money. Bring all that gold to me. So all the people took off the gold rings from their ears and brought them to Aaron. He took the gold from them, formed it in a mold. How do you get a calf mold? I don't know. Cast an image of a calf, and they said, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." Delivered you. Oh my God, they've gone completely crazy. Delivered you from the land of Egypt? No, that's Yahweh did that. When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it. Why would he build an altar? Because what?
Because he was asked.
But he wasn't asked to yet. When you encounter God in the Hebrew Scripture, you build an altar to mark the place, the moment. Jacob wrestles with an angel all night. He gets up and builds an altar. It could be simple as like put a stone here. It's a marker of this thing happened. And it's to recognize the epiphany. Which, it's really quite nice. Is that accurate? So he built an altar before it. This is where we met God. Think of how unbelievably idolatrous this is. I mean, literally idolatrous. We made an image of gold, and then we're making sacrifices to it. We built an idol and say, this is the God who brought us out of the land of Egypt. Oh, no, it isn't. No, it isn't at all. When Aaron saw this, he built an altar. Aaron made a proclamation, said, tomorrow shall be a festival to the Lord. That means to the new calf, right?
Right.
They rose early the next day. We're going to have a party. And they offered burnt offerings and brought sacrifices of well-being. And the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to revel. Do you happen to know the Hebrew word for revel? I'm not looking at any of my notes, by the way. When I'm reading that, it says they had basically wild parties with nakedness. It's like, oh, wow, you are getting kinky and crazy, and you are strayed far from where you are supposed to be. So they rose up to revel. It's an excellent word. And God, Yahweh, presumably, is up there with Moses praying, like super holy, everything's great, but knows all this is going on. The Lord said to Moses, go down at once. Your people, whom you brought up out of the land of Egypt, have acted perversely. So the people revel. God says that's perverse. They have been quick to turn aside from the way I commanded them. They have cast for themselves an image of a calf and have worshipped it and sacrificed to it and said, these your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. The Lord said to Moses, I have seen this people, how stiff-necked they are. Now think of this as God and how God is acting, like a jealous boyfriend. Now leave me alone so that my wrath may burn hot against them and I may consume them. I'm so sick of her. I'm so over her. I'm just going to be mad. And out of you, Moses, just forget them. I'll make you a great nation. Just you, I'll start over. This is a total do-over. To heck with these people. I'm over them. Notice how God says, go down at once. Your people, your son is being a jerk again. Not our son. It's yours that way. The ones you brought out of Egypt. So God is like, it's not my responsibility, not my fault. This is your fault.
That's right. So I was going to point out that the dialogue, if you will, that's captured between God and Moses here reveals this. There are lots of metaphors and imagery that are used to describe what's happening with regard to what the covenant is, or the Ten Commandments representing the covenant, that it's a marriage contract, that there's a special relationship, a covenantal relationship. And much of the discussion between Moses and God vacillates between who's responsible, whose people these are, right? What one is done, what God did versus what Moses and his people have allowed. It's sort of this, we're sort of a fly on the wall for a domestic squabble as to who really set this in motion, or who's responsible for these bad, ill-behaved children, these Israelites, who have found their way to worshiping a calf again. So it's sort of a fascinating insight as the rabbis imagine, as the authors of the text imagine how this played out, and then as the rabbinic tradition, the Midrashic, Talmudic tradition, reads into these discussions what's actually at play. Or, if you will, it's as if when we see this, when Moses actually responds to the golden calf, it's as if the rabbis take positions like defense attorneys for God, for the Jewish people, for Moses, justifying their various actions from different vantage points. So we'll see that. But we're sort of teeing that up by God saying to Moses, look what your people have done. It's sort of just an insight, whereas God becomes this protagonist in this unfolding drama.
Let me ask something, because reading the stories of Genesis and Exodus specifically, that's part of our Christian Bible too. But I've said this many times in many ways. Christian belief theology is a mix of Jewish thought, Bible, and Greek thought, both philosophy and theology, and those two coming together. You can see that very well in the Gospel of John. But in Christian thought, theology, history, we don't really have a tradition of arguing with God. It feels weird to me. O Lord, we beseech thee of thy great good. That's not an argument. That's a coming before the greatness. Oh, well, call God Abba, Dad, Father. There's a closeness there, but not an arguing. Or we relate to God through Jesus. It's not an argument. It's becoming like Jesus. It's following his teachings. It's submitting to his lordship. That'd be a very old-fashioned way. But not arguing. I mean, the thought of arguing with Jesus is bizarre, but yet within our tradition, right there it is, that's normal. It's normative, in fact, I would say. Am I off on that? Because within the text, it seems it's a regular thing to argue with God or wrestle with God.
It's a regular thing, whether it's Abraham, if you will, arguing or engaging God about the propriety of destroying Sodom and Gomorrah, right? For 50 righteous individuals, for 40, for 10, would you spare them? Sort of negotiating with God, arguing with God, is a strain of thought or Israelite practice that has informed Jewish theology to this day. That argue with God or grappling or using the text to refute God, or that's part and parcel of what it means to be Jewish. Or we've talked about that the word Israel or Yisrael means to wrestle with God. That's the nature of the relationship, which is, I can't speak to the discomfiture within a Christian tradition of the notion of arguing with God, but it's the opposite, if you will, of walking away from or dismissing God. You're engaged, right? I mean, you're actively engaged. And distinctions are made between arguments that are for the sake, and we can think about the arguments that you and I have had with people that are close to any one of us, whether you're arguing to win, to best them because they beat you in the argument last time, or because you really want to win this point, versus arguing what's called l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven. As we really want to better understand this, or I'm arguing this with you because I believe this to be right. I don't need to win the argument. I want to impress upon you what the argument is. Does that make sense? So it's not arguing for the sake of being the petulant teenager who gives his parents the side eye or disrespects parents. That's a sort of an anticipated stage of maturation. This is a kind of argument that somebody says, I take this seriously, or I take you seriously, or I'm not going to take it simply at face value. I want to understand what it means, or I want to push the limits of what it is to be in this covenantal relationship.
That's fascinating to me. Susie?
Is there any record of us arguing with God?
Who's us?
People.
Yes, that's what we're pointing out, is that there's a long tradition in the Torah, or if you will, in the Old Testament, certainly in Genesis and Exodus, we have a number of examples of where, whether it's Abraham or whether it's Moses, there are others who engage God on, God says, I'm going to destroy these people. Jonah, argue. Okay, good.
Yeah, Jonah runs away because he can't win the argument, basically. Good point.
Right. So, yes, there's a long strain of that.
And how do you hear God arguing back? I mean, I'm down here saying, God damn it, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Don't hear God saying, good people, God damn you.
So in these stories, we have God arguing back, or taking the argument at face value, or bending to the will of. Right? I mean, God decides, I won't, for this, he's persuaded by Abraham's argument, but not destroying Sodom and Gomorrah if there were enough people that were righteous. Or in this case, God doesn't actually destroy the Israelite people, right? For worship, for creating the golden calf. They're not destroyed.
So one way to think about all these stories, particularly about God and arguing with God, is that this is revealing the ancients' understanding of who God is and how we relate to this deity, Yahweh specifically. And there is, I would contend, as we've said many times, I don't want to say evolution, but at least growing understanding of what the nature of God is. It's quite different in the Old and New Testament. Is there continuity? Absolutely yes. Does God seem to be, one hates to say, better natured in the New Testament than the Old? More consistent, I would say. Probably a little more, not removed, because the whole point of the incarnation, Jesus becoming a human being and fully divine, is to be very present, but it's a different way of understanding that. And this relatively early understanding of who God is and how we relate, it means, as Aaron's saying, is direct engagement, not to win, not to punish, but to be in relationship with. And so part of being in a relationship with is learn. You could say this is adolescent, I think is a good way to describe that. What a kid has to go through is learning boundaries. This is too far. Yeah, I could push that a little bit. And that is, to a degree, what they're doing with the nature of God and what it means to be the covenant people. Will God still love me if I run after these other women? Yeah, God's going to be really mad. It's a very human dynamic of understanding what the nature of God is. So, Yahweh wants to be angry and destroy them and just start over. Moses implored, do any of you argue with God? How do you talk to God? In prayer, presumably. It's often transactional. I swear I'll up my pledge 20%, 10%, at least 5% if this good thing happens. Or I'll go to church every week, every month if this happens, or something. And that's all, and that's very scriptural, by the way, making deals. Or it's in Islam, the definition of a Muslim is one who submits to the will of Allah, which is not arguing at all. This is the truth. You will accept it, inshallah, God willing, and this is how it goes. Judaism is very different. Christianity, particularly the different strains, are different. Again, Moses implored the Lord, his God, and said, why does your wrath burn hot against your people, whom you brought out of the land? So he throws it back at Yahweh. I didn't bring them out. You did that with your mighty hand. Why? And this is his case he's making. Why should the Egyptians say it was with evil intent he brought them out to kill them in the mountains and consume them? You delivered them from Egypt, and now the Egyptians are going to talk bad about you. He brought him out to kill him himself. Is that the type of God you want to be known in the lands as? It's pretty funny. Turn from your fierce wrath. You should always say this to your partner when he or she is very angry. Just calm down. Calm down, and let me tell you what's what. Do not say that at all. Don't say that. Turn from your fierce wrath, Yahweh. Calm down. Change your mind. You're wrong, I'm right, and do not bring disaster on the people. So his more to make Yahweh think about it, reconsider, feel guilty. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, Jacob, your servants, how you swore to them by your own self. It's very funny if you think about it. What's the highest authority by which you can swear? I swear to God. You swore to them by yourself. God swore to God's self. That's a really impressive argument. I will remember when you told those three patriarchs, I will multiply your descendants like the stars of the heavens. I'll give you this land. Yeah, it's a pretty compelling argument. And the Lord changed his mind about the disaster he was planning to bring on his people. What do the rabbis say? Why is that story there, to change his mind?
So why does it exist that God changed his mind? I would tell you, as the omniscient reader, that it gives us insight to the Jewish theological imagination that we can prevail on God, as it were. This dialectic of arguing with God is not simply pushing back, but it's actually engaging in a real argument of how we're going to proceed. There's a wonderful story in the Talmud where the rabbis are debating a particular issue. It happens to be whether a given oven is kosher or not, given the way it's constructed. Can it be used to cook meat and then cook a dairy dish subsequently? Will it become contaminated? It's a very esoteric, technical conversation, and yet the various rabbis around the table prevail on divine arguments. If the argument is like, according to me, let this tree prove it, and the tree uproots itself and moves 100 cubits. And then if the argument is like me, then let these walls prove it. And the walls of the study hall in which they're meeting lean 45 degrees, but don't fall over. And they're bringing these supernatural kinds of arguments.
It's like, if you agree with me, don't say anything. Okay, good. You all agree with me. Move on.
And then before it's over, they all agree, the rabbis agree, that they'll follow the minority opinion of this particular rabbi that's in contravention of what it seems is the patent surface reading of the text. And how does God respond in this story? God laughs and says, "My children have defeated me," which is sort of the parent's appreciation of the first time you hear your child say something that's really a clever joke, or they beat you in an argument, or they prevailed upon you to change your own mind as the parent. The argument was really good or persuasive, or you appreciate that this young person in front of you actually has a claim on the argument they're making.
But you said, Dad.
Yeah, so you may be very frustrated that you lost it, but you also take some pride in the fact that your child is growing up in such a way that they can marshal an argument, or they can argue persuasively or respectfully. And that's the context from the rabbinic imagination, which informs how we read a story such as this. Why this story? I would tell you that it's to empower human agency, or not to submit in the Muslim notion of what it means to be a faithful religionist, but rather to be engaged in the practical work of creating the kind of society, the kind of community, the kind of world in which we want to live. How will we actually carry out the laws? Or what ought these laws be, such that we can organize a society, or such that we can have a sense of appreciation for why we do what we do.
Yeah. I'll tell you, thank you. I greatly appreciate the sense of engagement that stories like this suggest to us. So rather than being passive consumers of the deity, if we do the right prayers the right way, with the right words, with the right people, say the right things, behave a certain way, then we'll get things. That's in Scripture. But this pushes it, it's not the element of Christianity, but this pushes it further in, to me, a much better direction of full human engagement with God, and to live that way in every possible way. The Lord changed his mind. Then Moses, how would you feel if you won an argument with God? Pretty good would be the answer. Then Moses turned and went down from the mountain, carrying the 2 tablets in his hands, tablets that were written on both sides, written on the front and the back. The tablets were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God, engraved upon the tablets. When Joshua, Moses' assistant, heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said to Moses, "There's noise of war going on at camp." But he said, "It's not the sound made of victors, it's made by losers. It's the sound of revelers that I hear." And Moses, having just won the argument with God, what are they doing down there? As soon as Moses came near the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, Moses' anger burned hot. But that sounds just like Yahweh. Moses' anger burned hot, and he threw the tablets from his hands and broke them at the foot of the mountain. Why in the 10 Commandments written by God, God's self, both sides, he broke them? And this is where it gets fantastic. He took the calf they had made, burned it with fire, ground it to powder, scattered it on the water, and made the Israelites drink it. That is an awesome punishment for them. Why do you think, Moses, when he sees this, hears it and sees it, experiences the people, are they at war? No, they're having a party, they're reveling. What in the world is the golden calf? I just argued for you when Yahweh was mad, and this is what I come home to? Why would he break the Ten Commandments? He's angry, absolutely. What do the Ten Commandments symbolize? Say it, Liz. The people broke the Ten Commandments, exactly. The covenant, which symbolized the Ten Commandments, was broken. You shall have no other gods but me. Number one, broken. All the other, don't make for yourself a graven image or idol. Broken. It's the covenant has been broken. The people broke it. So he, you could say symbolically, throws him down. And he's really angry of what they've done after he just saved. Like, do you not know what I did for you? I just saved you from total destruction. And now look at you.
That's why we don't have them today, because he broke them.
That's why they're not on the walls of classrooms in America today, because he threw them on the ground and broke them. The story does keep going. He gets new ones.
Well, hang on,
Please.
if I could. That verse 32:19, where Moses is described as angry, there's an idiom in there, and the tablets are broken. I'm using the passive voice because I don't want to rely too much on the English translation of the verb that's used to describe Moses' relationship to the tablets just before they actually break. Right? We know they fall from his hands, whether he's thrown them, whether he drops them, and the rabbis, I mentioned earlier about acting sort of defense attorneys for, in this case, Moses, are arguing that, if you will, we just said that insofar as they're dancing around a calf, and we know the Ten Commandments outlaw idolatry, you shall have no other gods before me, that one argument is Moses is aware of what's on the Ten Commandments. The people are not yet aware. No. They are not, therefore, yet in violation because they haven't been given, haven't yet received the Ten Commandments. And so one argument is that Moses breaks the Ten Commandments, not unlike, the image I used, is the Secret Service agent who throws himself or herself in front of the bullet intended for the one that the agent is protecting, that Moses, if you will, takes the hit. He breaks the tablets in order to make certain that the Israelites are not in violation of the covenant. That's sort of a clever read, right? A sharp defense attorney comes up with that one, right? That Moses did this out of his love for the people or his parental protective instinct for the people. That if I can break the tablets, then the Israelites won't be in violation of them the moment they receive them. So that's one midrashic interpretation.
So the parents taking the blame for the child, basically.
Yeah, or right, we're throwing. It hurts me more than it hurts you, or I'm going to take the bullet. I'm going to take the hit. Moses, in that case, is, if you will, the bad guy, but not for breaking the tablets, but for being the one who intervenes. He's the intercessor between God's wrath and the people. That's one explanation, midrash. Another is that Moses sees the people dance on the calf. He, as their leader, loses faith in them, or he believes that they're doing something wrong. He's created a break with regard to their relationship. And in that moment, when the leader loses faith with the people and Moses is out of step with the Israelites, the letters ascend back to heaven. And now Moses is carrying rocks that are too heavy for him to carry. You have to suspend disbelief a bit. But it's another rabbinic insight into what's going on for Moses in that moment when he recognizes what the Israelites are doing. So it's not that he in anger hurled them, but he had a loss of faith in the people. He's a faithless leader in that moment, and as a result, he's no longer worthy or isn't able to hold on to the tablets because they're now just pieces of rock as the letters ascend. There are still other examples where Moses is described as being angry. And when you're angry, it may not be typically it's not the right time to make a significant decision. And so we have other examples of Moses, whether he's striking the rock or whether he's breaking the tablets or whether he's sort of giving in to his own anger, his own emotional impulses, which is maybe not the best quality in that, which makes Moses all the more human. What's really significant, go ahead, please.
Moses knew about the calf. I told him.
Well, I don't know how much in the next, he's actually given them to understand what they were doing, quite. But seeing is believing, right? I mean, it's one thing to hear tell that people are behaving badly. It's another thing to see them engaged in the activity, arguably. What I want to make sure we don't lose, you want to jump in? I just want to share this thought. When we picture the tabernacle, in which we remember the Ten Commandments are after Moses comes down with the Ten Commandments, that's clearly just written by God. That's over and over re-emphasized, right? That's written by the finger of God, and God who wrote it. Moses breaks them, or they break. Now Moses has to go, after feeding the ashes to everyone, has to go up a second time. This time, in a subsequent chapter, I think it's chapter 34, goes back up the mountain, this time carrying the rocks up the mountain, the empty rocks, or the uninscribed rocks, atop Mount Sinai. The text is a little bit cloudy, the pun's intended, right? A cloud descends. It's less than clear because of the passive voice and the way Hebrew verbs contain the third person pronoun within them. It's less than clear in the second version whether God wrote them as God had written the first, or whether Moses and God write them, or whether Moses wrote them dictated by God. And we can have a larger discussion about who wrote the Torah or who wrote the Bible. Is it divinely inspired? Was it by the finger of God? Right? But the point is that the second set of tablets is not as explicitly a divine creation as was the first set. Moses comes down the mountain with the second intact set. And when we learn that the tablets are placed in the ark, or like Raiders of the Lost Ark, remember? That the tabernacle that's now waiting in some governmental warehouse, remember the end of the movie, right? Was to contain the Ten Commandments. The ancient rabbis are concerned that there were two sets of tablets. We only remember the second set, the intact set, but the rabbis were very concerned that this first set of tablets, now broken shards of rock at the base of Mount Sinai, shouldn't be left behind. And so there's a wonderful, wonderful midrash, one of my favorite, in which it's described that within the ark are contained both the broken and the intact set of tablets. They're placed side by side because they're of equal value. That's what the text describes them as being of equal value. Now then, that's really fascinating. If we are to understand that the broken tablets and the intact tablets are of equal value, how might we understand that metaphorically about our own experiences in our own lives? Our failures, our setbacks, our reversals, our losses are as an important part of our own story as are our successes and our triumphs and our accomplishments and our achievements. I wouldn't be who each of us is respectively were it not for all of those experiences, and we carry them forward with us. Now that's an expansive midrashic story, but the notion that the first set of tablets are broken, the rabbis are not content to simply leave them there, but they carry them forward. The other question that seems immediately obvious to me, I invite you to consider it also, is why include this first story at all? Why include the story of the broken tablets, of the golden calf? Why not simply elide that, go right to the second story, we get the Ten Commandments, we carry them forward? Why would the author or the editor choose to include this? What does this first story have to teach us that were it not included, we'd be the poorer for, or we wouldn't have as deep and rich an understanding? Right? It's not an obvious story that you would think to include. If you were going to write your own life story, you might choose to mention certain things that were unhappy or unpleasant, but you'd be forgiven if you chose not to, right? It's your story to tell. Does everyone understand sort of the questions that were raised about what's going on there? I'm sorry.
How are the two tablets different?
No notion of how the two tablets, the original rock and the original, is there any way to tell how they...
We don't have a description of them. We speak of them as if they were the same the second time, or they were, right? We have two versions of the Ten Commandments in Exodus 1 and Deuteronomy the other. But whether the first set that was broken differed from the second set that's described in two different locations, we don't quite know.
Good. We need to finish quickly.
Yeah.
Very briefly, the punishment, grinding the calf down to powder and make them drink it, I have done that before. I received one time ashes for cremation from, her first name is Montine. And if you see them, they're in a green plastic box in a big, thick plastic bag. And I never looked in at that point, lifted the bag up, and oh, that's neat. And then it dropped 2 inches and then shot some of Montine up my nose. And I really, really liked her. But why I tell that story is because it's unbelievably gross. You cannot get the powder out of the back of your throat for days. And I kept sneezing. And what he did, Moses, is made the people live with it. And not to put too fine a point on it, but he made them drink their gods and then pass through their digestive system. That's the worth of your new gods, when you relieve them out. Then the story continues with the people running wild, and he gets really mad at Aaron, his brother. Why did you let him do this? And Aaron's response is, well, they came to me. They said they needed gods, and I told them it's not my fault. Then a very difficult part for us to hear, Moses calls who's loyal to Yahweh, and people from the tribe of Levi say, I am. And he says, take your swords, and they kill 3,000 people, and they were consecrated to God that day. And they become, who did the tribe of Levi? What do we know them as? Levites. So when we hear the story of the Good Samaritan, which we will tonight if you come, the guy gets hit, he's beaten, left by the side of the road dead. A priest passes by, doesn't do anything. A Levite passes by, doesn't do anything. And then a Samaritan. So who did the Levites then become, Aaron?
So the Levites were the priests, and from the priests come the Kohanim, or the priestly class, are part of the Levites. So there's a hierarchy of the Kohanim, or the priests, and the Levites, than the average Israelites.
Yeah. So if Cohen, the last name, comes from priest. Yeah.
Samaritans considered sort of bad guys.
Samaritans are the bad guys. They're your cousins you don't like to recognize. They're somewhat similar, but definitely different enough that you don't want anything to do with them. They don't associate with one another. And so the Samaritan would be the last guy you would expect to come by and help. The priest should, the Levite should. So they become consecrated. The next day, the last paragraph there, is Moses returned. They have to make atonement for their sin, and God puts a plague on them as punishment for the golden calf, but doesn't wipe them all out. So they are, the covenant's still active. So we'll next week finish up the rest of the story. Thank you all very much.
Good.